The impossible defense. The Dauntless hummed beneath Captain Elena Ray's feet as the experimental vessel accelerated toward the Kuiper Belt. Her small fleet, nicknamed the Suicide Seven by skeptical military officials, represented humanity's bleeding edge of technological achievement. Each ship housed a neural resonance drive that could manipulate the quantum field underlying normal space, allowing for unprecedented maneuverability and speed. Status report on the modification protocols, Elena called out, her voice steady despite the weight pressing down on her shoulders. Lieutenant Kai Chen looked up from his station. NRD modifications at 87% completion across all vessels, Captain. The Hawking reports minor calibration issues, but expects resolution within the next 30 minutes. Elena nodded, studying the tactical display where the Karvash formation appeared as a crimson cloud expanding across the star chart. Their numbers were overwhelming, each alien vessel reportedly carrying enough firepower to level a small continent. Conventional warfare wasn't an option. They needed to change the rules. Commander Ortega, Elena said, turning to her XO, draft the final contingency protocols. If this fails, make sure every ship has self-destruct sequences ready. We can't let them capture our technology. The bridge fell silent as the implication settled over the crew. Earth had days, not weeks, before the Karvash arrived. Evacuation efforts were underway planetside, but billions would remain regardless of how many ships they launched. There simply wasn't time. Incoming transmission from Admiral Yuan, announced Communications Officer Patel. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the weathered face of Earth Defense Fleet's commanding officer. Captain Rice, our deep space reconnaissance has confirmed what we feared. The Karvash aren't just coming to conquer, they're harvesting. Previous civilizations they've encountered have been stripped of resources, populations enslaved for labor and experimentation. Elena felt her jaw tighten. Understood, Admiral. All the more reason our mission can't fail. The Security Council has authorized Omega Protocol. If your mission fails, Yoon continued, his voice grave. Earth will not be taken intact. Omega Protocol, the systematic destruction of Earth's major population centers and infrastructure by their own weapons. A scorched Earth policy on a global scale. We won't let it come to that, sir, Elena replied firmly. As the transmission ended, Elena turned to face her bridge crew. Their expressions reflected the gravity of their situation, but she saw something else too, determination. I know what you're all thinking, Elena said, her voice carrying across the bridge. The odds are impossible, 7 ships against 3,000. But remember, we're not trying to outgun them. We're trying to outthink them. She activated the holographic display at the center of the bridge, showing the modified NRD configuration. The Karvash rely on perfect coordination through their neural network. It's their greatest strength, but also their greatest vulnerability. Our modified NRDs will create a quantum resonance field that should, in theory, disrupt their communication. Chief Engineer Navarro spoke up from his station. Should is the operative word, Captain. We're betting everything on untested modifications to experimental technology. Elena smiled grimly. Welcome to the frontier of human innovation. Chief, we've always done our best work with our backs against the wall. Dr. Eliza Mbiki, the fleet's xenobiologist, stepped forward. Captain, I've completed my analysis of the Karvash neural network based on the data from previously encountered species. Their hive mind appears to operate on quantum entanglement principles, remarkably similar to how our NRD drives function. Can we exploit this similarity? Elena asked, her interest piqued. Better than that, Dr. Mbiki replied, her eyes bright with excitement. We might be able to hijack it. The NRD modifications we're making won't just disrupt their communications. They could fracture the entire hive consciousness. Each ship, possibly even each individual Karvash, could be neurologically isolated. For the first time since the alien Armada had been detected, Elena felt something close to hope. Keep working, Doctor. This could be the edge we need. The ship's alert system chimed, indicating they had reached the deployment zone. Alina took her place in the command chair, feeling the weight of Earth's future settling onto her shoulders. "All hands to battle stations," she ordered. "Prepare for NRD synchronization." The Dauntless and its 6 sister ships formed their heptagonal pattern at the heliopause, the boundary where our solar wind meets interstellar space. Beyond, the darkness sparkled with the approaching lights of the Karvash Armada. "Captain," Lieutenant Chen called out, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the lead Karvash vessels. They appear to be scanning us." "Let them look," Alina replied. "They won't understand what they're seeing until it's too late." The holographic display showed the enemy fleet slowing as it approached, perhaps puzzled by the small formation of human ships that dared to stand against their overwhelming numbers. "They're broadcasting," reported Officer Patel. "Our translation matrix is processing now." A harsh, multi-toned voice filled the bridge, a chorus speaking in unison that made the hair on Alina's neck stand on end. "Humans of Earth, we are the Karvash Collective. We have studied your species and determined you are suitable for integration. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is inefficient and will result in increased casualties. Surrender your vessels and prepare your planet for our arrival." Alina exchanged glances with Commander Ortega, who shook his head slightly. The arrogance in the message was palpable and potentially exploitable. "Open a channel," Alina ordered. "Let's introduce ourselves properly." When the connection was established, Alina stood, facing the view screen that now showed a chamber filled with pale, elongated figures standing in perfect symmetry, their movements synchronized down to the smallest gesture. "This is Captain Alina Reyes of the Earth Defense Fleet. We acknowledge your message and request a dialogue to discuss the terms of our integration." The Karvash representatives tilted their heads in unison, their large, milky eyes blinking simultaneously. "Dialogue is unnecessary. Your understanding is irrelevant to the process." "Perhaps," Alina countered smoothly, "but surely efficiency is valued in your collective. A peaceful integration would minimize resource expenditure and preserve more of what makes Earth valuable to you." There was a pause, barely perceptible that there. Alina had correctly identified their primary value: efficiency. "You will receive representatives aboard your vessel," the Karvash stated finally. "Coordinates for transfer will follow." As the transmission ended, the bridge erupted with concerned voices. "Captain, you can't be serious. Allowing them on board would—" Alina raised a hand, silencing the objections. "This is exactly what we need. Close proximity to calibrate our disruptors. Dr. Mbiki, how soon can you analyze their neural patterns if we get them on board?" The xenobiologist grinned. "Give me 15 minutes with one of them, and I'll map their entire quantum communication spectrum." "Good," Alina nodded. "Commander Ortega, assemble a security team. Chief Navarro, prepare to fine-tune the NRD based on Dr. Mbiki's findings. Everyone else, continue battle preparations. They think they're coming to negotiate our surrender. Let's use that confidence against them." As her crew dispersed to their tasks, Alina gazed out at the vast alien armada through the observation window. Their ships, angular and imposing, appeared to shimmer slightly as they communicated with each other through quantum networks humans had only recently begun to understand. Commander Ortega approached, standing beside her at the window. "Are we crossing a line here, Alina? We're about to fundamentally alter another species' consciousness." Alina didn't look away from the alien fleet. "They crossed that line when they came here to integrate us against our will. We're fighting for our right to remain human, to maintain our individual consciousness. This is a battle for the nature of consciousness itself." The ship's alert system chimed, indicating the approaching Karvash shuttle. Alina straightened her uniform, mentally preparing for what would be humanity's most crucial first contact. "All hands, prepare to receive our guests," she ordered. "And may we remind them why it's dangerous to underestimate humans." Cognitive warfare. The negotiation chamber aboard the Dauntless, felt unnaturally still as Elena faced Supreme Coordinator Xelvarin, the Karvash emissary. The alien's exoskeleton clicked softly with each movement, bioluminescent patterns pulsing across its surface in complex sequences. 4 of the creature's upper limbs remained in what the xenobiology team identified as a dominance position, while the lower ones manipulated a series of crystalline objects. Communication devices, Elena presumed. 23 civilizations have stood where you stand. The translation matrix interpreted Xelvarin's clicks and whistles. 23 have fallen. Some fought. Some begged. The outcome remained unchanged. Elena maintained a neutral expression, though inwardly she noted the pride in the alien's posture. Pride was exploitable. A universal weakness, perhaps. Perhaps, Elena replied carefully, but humans have a saying. The 24th time's the charm. Behind her, Commander Ortega suppressed a smile as the translation caused the aliens' bioluminescent patterns to flicker in what their xenobiologists interpreted as confusion. Explain this concept, demanded Xelvarin. It means we're different, Elena said, leaning forward. We'd like to understand more about integration. What happened to the individuals of species who accepted your terms? As Xelvarin launched into a detailed explanation of the elevation process, a procedure that sounded suspiciously like complete neural rewriting, Elena noticed Dr. Mbiki's subtle hand signal from the side of the room. They'd made progress with the signal analysis. Fascinating, Elena commented, stalling further. And this integration process, is it voluntary on an individual basis? The alien's upper limbs twitched in what their briefing suggested was amusement or derision. Individual consent is a primitive concept. The collective determines necessity. Resistance against elevation indicates defective cognition. Elena nodded thoughtfully. We have similar philosophical debates on Earth. Some of our greatest thinkers have contemplated the nature of free will versus determinism. This approach, engaging the alien commander in philosophical discourse, was calculated. Human diplomatic history showed that even the most aggressive species typically responded to intellectual engagement, if only out of curiosity or a desire to demonstrate superiority. As Xelvarin expounded on collective consciousness theory, Elena received a text notification on her neural implant, quantum signature isolated, NRD frequency match at 92% compatibility. Ready for implementation. Your theories remind me of our philosopher Hegel, Elena continued smoothly. He proposed that individual consciousness was merely a fragment of universal consciousness, not unlike your collective. Commander Ortega stepped forward right on cue. Perhaps our guests would appreciate refreshment while we continue discussions. Their journey has been long. The suggestion was deliberately absurd. They had no idea what the Karvash consumed, if anything, but it created the necessary distraction as Ortega led several of the alien delegation toward another section of the ship. Meanwhile, Dr. Mbiki managed to complete her scans of the communicator crystals they carried, gathering crucial data on their quantum signature patterns. Xelvarin remained, compound eyes fixed on Elena. Your delay tactics are transparent, Captain. You have precisely 6 of your hours to prepare your species for integration. We have studied your defenses. They are inadequate. Elena smiled thinly. Perhaps, but you've studied our weapons, not our minds. That may prove to be an oversight. For a moment, the bioluminescent patterns across Xelvarin's exoskeleton intensified, shifting to hues the humans hadn't observed before. You believe your individuality is strength, the alien said, the translation matrix struggling to capture the complex tonal qualities. We see it as your fundamental flaw. Billions of minds working separately, inefficiently, in conflict. How can such chaos stand against perfect unity? Elena stood, signaling the end of the session. That's exactly what we're going to show you. As the alien delegation departed, Dr. Mbiki hurried to Elena's side, excitement evident despite her professional demeanor. Captain, we've identified the primary carrier frequency. Their entire communication network operates on quantum entanglement principles, remarkably similar to our NRD theoretical framework. Elena's eyes narrowed. Can we exploit it? Better than that, Dr. Mbeki replied. We can hijack it. The NRD modifications we're making won't just disrupt their communications. They'll fracture the entire hive consciousness. Each ship, possibly each individual Karvash, could be neurologically isolated. For the first time since the alien Armada had been detected, Elena felt something close to hope. Keep working, Doctor. Not a word of this to our guests. As far as they know, we're resigned to our fate. Outside the viewports, the massive Karvash vessels loomed, their angular forms blotting out the stars. In just a few hours, they would learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't found in our arsenals but in our minds, in our ability to thrive in the very chaos they despised. The holographic display in the dauntless engineering bay shimmered as Chief Engineer Navarro manipulated the NRD schematics. The drive's core, a spherical chamber where quantum fields themselves folded, pulsed with an otherworldly blue glow, microscopic tears forming and healing in rapid succession. The principle is surprisingly elegant, Navarro explained to Elena and the gathered officers. The NRD creates controlled quantum field manipulations to allow transit. These manipulations release entangled particles as a byproduct, particles that exist in a state of superposition until observed. Elena leaned closer to the display. And these particles match the Karvash communication frequency. Not just match, Navarro said, his eyes bright with the thrill of discovery. They're complementary. It's as if we accidentally built a device that speaks their quantum language, but with an accent they can't quite understand. Dr. Mbeki stepped forward, pointing to her calculations. We believe the Karvash evolved to utilize quantum entanglement for their hive mind. Their consciousness literally exists in a distributed quantum state across multiple bodies. Commander Ortega frowned. So we're not just jamming their communications, we're disrupting their very consciousness. Precisely. Elena finished, the implications settling heavily. We're not killing them, but we're fundamentally changing what they are. A moment of silence fell over the group as the ethical ramifications became clear. They were about to transform an entire species, potentially billions of minds, without consent. Lieutenant Chen broke the silence. If we don't do this, humanity ends. There's no moral high ground in extinction. Elena nodded grimly. Agreed. How do we maximize the effect? Navarro brought up a new simulation, showing the 7 human ships arranged in a precise heptagonal pattern. The quantum disruption follows an inverse square law. To affect their entire forward fleet, we need to position our ships exactly 26.7 kilometers apart and synchronize the NRD pulses to create constructive interference. Like an amplifier, Ortega observed. Exactly, Navarro confirmed. Each ship alone would disrupt perhaps a dozen Karvash vessels. Together, we can affect hundreds, possibly thousands if we push the drives beyond safety parameters. Elena studied the simulation as it played out, showing waves of quantum disruption expanding from their formation. How long will the effect last? Dr. Mbeki shook her head. Unknown. Theoretically, once their quantum entanglement is broken, they'd need to physically reconnect to reestablish the network, but they may have recovery protocols we haven't anticipated. Then we need to make our first strike count. Elena decided. Begin moving the fleet into position. Make it look like we're preparing defensive formations, nothing that would tip them off to our actual plan. As the officers dispersed to their stations, Elena gazed out at the vast alien armada through the observation window. Their ships, angular and imposing, appeared to shimmer slightly as they communicated with each other through quantum networks humans had only recently begun to understand. The ship's alert system chimed, indicating they had reached their designated position in the formation. Elena took her position in the command chair, feeling the weight of 8 billion human lives resting on this moment. Activate quantum interference protocols, she ordered. All ships stand by to initiate maximum amplitude neural resonance. The countdown began, and with it, the future of two species hung in the balance. The effect rippled across space like a stone thrown into a cosmic pond. As the synchronized NRD drives reached maximum amplitude, the quantum disruption wave expanded outward at near-light speed, washing over the forward elements of the Karvash fleet. On the dauntless bridge, sensor readings spiked chaotically as quantum fields convulsed between dimensions. Impact in 3, 2, 1. Lieutenant Chen counted down, his voice hushed with anticipation. The effect was immediate and visible across the view screen. The perfectly coordinated Karvash formation shattered. Ships veered wildly, some colliding with nearby vessels, others spinning out of formation, as if suddenly piloted by incompetent crews. The precise geometric attack patterns dissolved into random movement. "It's working," Ortega breathed, incredulous despite the theoretical models. "They're completely disoriented." Elena leaned forward in her command chair, studying the tactical display. Status report on the alien vessels. Dr. Mbeki analyzed the incoming data streams. Their power signatures are fluctuating wildly. Internal communications appear fragmented. "No coordinated weapons targeting, Captain. We've effectively given them a collective seizure." "Now we press the advantage," Elena decided. "Tactical, identify key communication nodes and propulsion systems. Target those specifically, disable rather than destroy where possible." The bridge crew worked with focused precision, each member making independent decisions within their domain of expertise, a stark contrast to the now flailing Karvash, who had never needed to think for themselves. The human capacity for individual initiative and adaptation, forged through millions of years of evolution on a chaotic and unpredictable planet, now proved decisive against an enemy that had relied entirely on perfect coordination. "Captain, we're receiving unusual signals from the alien vessels," Communications Officer Paddle reported, frowning at his console. "It's not their standard communication pattern. It's erratic, almost like distress calls, but fragmented." Elena exchanged glances with Dr. Mbeki. "They're experiencing individuality for the first time in their evolutionary history," the xenobiologist suggested. "Their neural architecture isn't designed for it." On the main view screen, they watched as a Karvash cruiser fired randomly into space, its weapon systems apparently operating without coordination. Another vessel had powered down completely, drifting lifelessly among the chaos. "Captain, the flagship, Xelveran's vessel, is broadcasting on all frequencies," Paddle reported. "It's difficult to translate. The syntax is breaking down." Elena nodded. "Put it through." The speakers crackled with a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and electronic tones, the translation matrix struggling to process the input. Finally, words formed, the voice modulation erratic and distorted. "What is happening?" The voices. "Gone. Alone. Help. Reconnect. Please." The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed the implications. The supreme coordinator of an invading alien armada, a being that had overseen the conquest of 23 civilizations, was experiencing existential terror at being cut off from the hive mind. "They've never been alone in their heads before," Dr. Mbeki murmured. Elena's expression remained resolute. "Continue targeting their key systems. Maintain the disruption field at maximum efficiency." She turned to Dr. Mbeki. "Could they adapt to this? Find a way to shield themselves?" The xenobiologist studied her readings. "Theoretically, yes. Given enough time, they might adjust their quantum communication frequencies or develop some form of isolation protection. But right now, they're in neurological shock." "Captain," Navarro reported from engineering, his voice strained over the comm system. "The NRD drives are holding, but we're seeing increased stress on the containment fields. We can maintain this level of disruption for approximately 46 hours before critical failure becomes inevitable." Elena processed this information, making rapid calculations. Then we have 46 hours to push as deep into their fleet as possible and cause maximum disorientation. She opened the fleet-wide channel. All ships advance into the disrupted zone. Target their communication hubs, propulsion systems, and fleet coordination nodes. Let's show them what happens when humans embrace chaos. The 7 Earth vessels moved forward in perfect coordination, each captain executing Alina's orders while adapting to the rapidly changing battlefield. A dance of organized chaos that the Karvash, even at their best, could never have matched. Evolution through adversity. By the 3rd day of engagement, the Dauntless shuddered continuously as hairline fractures spread through the NRD containment chamber. Emergency repair crews worked in shifts, applying molecular bonding agents to critical stress points, even as the drive pushed quantum fields to their limits. Chief Engineer Navarro hadn't slept in 36 hours, his eyes bloodshot as he monitored the deteriorating system. "We're running out of reinforcement materials," he reported to Alina, his voice hoarse from shouting orders in the noisy engine room. "I've repurposed structural components from non-essential areas, but there's a limit to how much we can cannibalize the ship." Alina studied the damage reports on her tablet. The other 6 vessels reported similar conditions. Essential systems failing, crews exhausted, hulls compromised. But they had pushed deep into Karvash territory, disrupting over 2,000 enemy vessels along the way. "What about the quantum resonance field?" Alina asked. "Any signs of the Karvash adapting?" Dr. Mbiki shook her head. "They're trying. We've detected at least 9 attempts to establish alternative communication frequencies, but each time we've managed to expand our disruption to cover the new spectrum." She massaged her temples, fighting fatigue. "Their latest attempt shows signs of desperation. They're trying to use old-fashioned electromagnetic transmissions as a workaround." Commander Ortega studied the tactical display where the alien command structure was visible, having pulled back behind 3 defensive lines. "They're learning," he observed. "Slowly, but they're figuring out how to function without the hive mind. We don't have much time before they develop effective countermeasures." The bridge fell silent as the implications settled over the exhausted crew. They had achieved the impossible already. A handful of ships had halted the advance of an overwhelming alien armada. But it wasn't enough. If they retreated now, the Karvash would recover, adapt, and return stronger than ever. Alina's gaze fixed on the alien command ships in the tactical display. If we could reach their central command structure, disrupt Excelverin and the primary nexus, we might not just pause their invasion. We might end it permanently. Navarro looked up sharply. "Captain, you can't be suggesting. The drives won't survive a push that deep. We'd be lucky if they didn't destabilize and take us all out in the process." "What's your best estimate, Chief? How much deeper could we push?" Alina asked. Navarro ran calculations on his tablet, frowning at the results. "At current output levels, maybe another 60 light minutes before catastrophic failure. But if we divert all non-essential power, including life support, we might reach their command ships for one final concentrated pulse." "And after that pulse?" Ortega asked quietly. Navarro met his gaze. "After that, the containment fields collapse. Best case scenario, the drives simply burn out. Worst case." He didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone on the bridge understood the implications of an uncontrolled quantum resonance cascade. Alina looked around at her officers, humans who had family waiting for them back on Earth, who had joined the fleet to explore the stars rather than die among them. "I won't order anyone to continue on what might be a one-way mission," she said solemnly. "I'm asking for volunteers only." Lieutenant Chen spoke first, his voice firm despite his exhaustion. "Earth is behind us, Captain. 8 billion people who will either live free or die under Karvash control. I volunteer." One by one, the bridge officers voiced their agreement. No one hesitated. Alina felt a surge of pride that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. "Very well," she said, standing to address her crew. Send the order to the fleet. All hands prepare for final acceleration. We're going straight for their command ships." As the 7 human vessels pushed deeper into enemy territory, their drives straining against the laws of physics, something unexpected began to happen among the disrupted Karvash fleet. Isolated from the hive mind, forced to process information individually for the first time, some of the aliens were adapting in ways no one had predicted. "Captain," Dr. Mbiki called out, studying the incoming data with fascination. "I'm detecting unusual activity in several of the disabled Karvash ships. Their neural patterns are evolving." "Evolving how?" Elena asked, joining her at the science station. "Their brains are forming new neural pathways, compensating for the loss of the hive connection. It's like watching accelerated evolution in real time. Some individuals are developing stronger independent cognitive functions." Communications Officer Patil interrupted. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from one of the damaged Karvash vessels. It's different from their previous communications. The translation matrix is having trouble with it, but it appears to be an individual speaking, not the collective." "Put it through," Elena ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was hesitant, the clicks and whistles more varied in tone and rhythm than the previous monotonous Karvash communications. "Human vessel, I am. I think I am. Trell, is that me? I was part of everything. Now I am. Only me. This is painful, but also new, different thoughts. My thoughts, not collective thoughts. Please, explain. What have you done to us?" Elena glanced at Dr. Mbiki, who appeared both shocked and fascinated. "This is unprecedented," the xenobiologist whispered. "Individual identity formation in a species that's never known it." Elena addressed the alien entity. "Trell, my name is Captain Elena Reyes. We disrupted your collective neural network in self-defense. Your fleet came to assimilate us, to destroy our individuality. We fought back using the only advantage we had." There was a long pause before the response came. "I understand now. The collective, we never questioned, never considered the value of what we were destroying. Individual thought was inefficient, but now I see. It creates diversity, new ideas. I am thinking things the collective never thought." Other communications began flooding in, dozens, then hundreds of individual Karvash, experiencing independent thought for the first time, expressing confusion, fear, wonder, and in some cases, regret. "Captain," Ortega said softly, "we may have just caused the biggest revolution in their species' history." Elena nodded slowly, the implications dawning on her. "We didn't just defend Earth. We might have liberated the Karvash from themselves." But there was no time to fully process this development. The tactical display showed they were approaching the command nexus, the heart of the Karvash fleet. "All ships, prepare for final NRD pulse," Elena ordered. "Divert all power to the drives. Let's finish this." As they closed in on the massive central structure, a sprawling complex of interconnected ships surrounding a central sphere, the Karvash finally managed to mount a coordinated defense. Energy weapons lanced out, catching the human vessel hawking in a crossfire that sheared off its port side. The Einstein lost propulsion, drifting helplessly as its crew evacuated to the remaining ships. "They're concentrating fire on our formation," Lieutenant Chen reported as the Dauntless shook under enemy fire. "They've figured out our pattern is the key." Elena gripped her command chair as another blast rocked the ship. "Evasive maneuvers, break formation." "But Captain," Navarro protested over the comm, "breaking formation will reduce the effectiveness of the disruption field by at least 60%. Better that than being destroyed before we can deliver the final pulse," Elena countered. "All ships, execute random evasion pattern Delta. Regroup at coordinates 774 Mark 38 in 2 minutes." The human fleet scattered, forcing the Karvash to divide their fire. It gave them the precious seconds needed to close the final distance to the command nexus. NRD containment fields at critical levels, Navarro reported, his voice nearly drowned out by the sound of alarms in engineering. We've got minutes at best before catastrophic failure. Elena made her decision. All ships converge on the command nexus. Prepare to deliver maximum disruption pulse on my mark. The 5 remaining vessels, Dauntless, Newton, Curie, Planck, and Bohr, executed a final burn, pushing their engines beyond safety parameters to reach optimal position around the Karvash command structure. In position, Lieutenant Chen reported, his console sparking from overloaded circuits. Weapons locked on supporting structures, Tactical Officer Rodriguez added. Elena took a deep breath. Initiate final pulse. All weapons fire. The synchronized NRD drives released a quantum disruption wave of unprecedented magnitude, engulfing the entire command nexus in a sphere of reality-bending energy. Simultaneously, the human vessels unleashed their conventional weapons, targeting the structural supports that held the central sphere in place. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Karvash command structure fractured, pieces drifting apart as control systems failed. The central sphere, housing Supreme Coordinator Xelvarin and the highest levels of the collective, went dark, its power systems overloaded by the quantum surge. On the Dauntless, systems were failing catastrophically. The NRD drive core glowed with an intensity that threatened to breach containment at any moment. All hands to escape pods, Elena ordered. Prepare for emergency evacuation. But before they could execute the order, Communications Officer Patel called out in surprise. Captain, incoming transmission from Xelvarin. The view screen flickered to life, showing the Karvash leader. But something was different. The perfectly synchronized movements were gone, replaced by jerky, independent motions. The bioluminescent patterns across its exoskeleton pulsed in chaotic, non-repeating sequences. Captain Reyes, Xelvarin's voice came through, now singular rather than the chorus it had been before. I understand now. For the first time. I understand. Understand what? Elena asked, wary of a trick. The value of chaos, of independence. I am experiencing thought. True thought, not collective consensus, but my own ideas. The aliens seemed to struggle with the concept. The Karvash have been wrong. For millennia, we believed unity was strength, but we were just afraid of the chaos of individual thought. And now, Elena pressed. Now, I call for cessation of hostilities. The Karvash will withdraw from Earth space. We must reconsider our existence, learn to be individuals within a community, not merely cells in a collective organism. The bridge crew exchanged glances of disbelief. Could it really be this simple? Dr. Mbeki stepped forward. Captain, I believe this is genuine. The neural patterns I'm reading from the command nexus show radical reorganization, true individualized thought processes emerging from what was once a single hive mind. And the rest of the fleet? Elena asked. Disorganized, but increasingly showing signs of individual neural activity, Dr. Mbeki confirmed. What we've witnessed is nothing short of the birth of a new form of consciousness among the Karvash. Elena turned back to the view screen. Xelvarin, we accept your cessation of hostilities. But know this, if the Karvash ever threaten Earth again, we will be ready. The alien inclined its head in what appeared to be a gesture of respect. I do not believe we will, Captain Reyes. You have given us something we never knew we lacked, ourselves. There is much to explore in this